Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another how-to video. I'm recording this on June 29th, 2015. In this episode, we are starting a new chapter looking at safety. Specifically, we're looking at common problems that can occur with JavaScript and how to prevent them. The primary tool that we're going to use to do that is static code analysis, or linting. Static code analysis, it simply means having a program look at your source code and find errors without running it. And lint is a specific type of tool that looks for more basic or simple to find types of errors. There are very expensive tools out there that will do static code analysis, maybe not of JavaScript, but of other languages, that can detect all kinds of fascinating things. We're looking for simpler problems like leaving out a var keyword or using unsafe comparison operators or something like that. The great-great-granddaddy of all the linting tools for JavaScript is JSLint by Douglas Crockford. He built this tool as a way of, well, finding the common errors. He's famous for having written a book called JavaScript, The Good Parts, that says, hey, you know, JavaScript doesn't suck that much as long as you constrain your use to the parts that are the good parts. And JSLint was a tool for telling you when you exceeded those bounds, when you went outside of the good parts. Now, Douglas Crockford can be quite opinionated, and not everybody agrees with all of his opinions. In particular, some of his opinions are more about style than actual things that cause errors. So JSLint was forked, and another tool called JSHint was created. This is a linting tool. It is based on the JSLint source code, but actually it's changed a lot since then. And the main thing it did in the beginning was it just provided the ability to turn off more of Douglas Crockford's opinions, turn off more of the things that JSLint enforced. Now, since then, a new tool called ESLint has come out. I don't have a lot of experience with ESLint, and it is just now starting to go into 1.0, and apparently there's going to be some breaking changes when that comes out. So I haven't bothered trying ESLint, but some people really like it. Now, one of the important things with a linting tool, linting can be used for two things. One, it can be used to find errors. Second, can be used to find code style changes. And personally, I don't think having a lint tool check for code style, like where do you like, some people, for example, some people like to put their brackets like this. A lint tool can check for that. I think that's a waste of time. If you've got that kind of disagreement on your team, solve it socially. Talk to the people. Don't try to brute force your way through it. That never really works all that well. It just leads to bad feelings. So in my opinion, a lint tool is best used when it's used to find actual issues. ESLint sort of mixes the two together. It can do either rules or style, and it's new. JSLint also tends to mix some of Douglas Crockford's opinions, and it's hard to turn off warnings when you need to. So my go-to tool, and the go-to tool for many people, is JSHint, and that's what I'm going to be showing you how to use in today's episode. Now, again, the reason we're using a linting tool is because JavaScript has some weirdnesses in it that frankly lead to errors that you wouldn't expect. So we are going to lint our code to find those areas of problem and warn us about them. Similarly, you will also notice that we have this use strict option at the top of our files. This is something that we're going to put in every file. This tells the JavaScript interpreter at runtime to check for common errors. So linting is static code analysis, and this does runtime code analysis or runtime error checking that will tell us when we make, again, common mistakes. Now, lint will actually prevent most of these use strict warnings from coming off, but it's good form to have both of these. The other thing you'll see here is that we've got this immediately invoked function expression, or IFE, outside of our code. What this says is create a function and execute it immediately. And what that does is that makes sure that nothing runs in the global scope. None of the variables we define are globals. Now in Node, automatically none of the variables we define are global. But again, this is a good habit. It doesn't cost us anything. And I've got my code template set up to just create this by default. I suggest you do the same. So those are three code safety things to keep in mind. One, an IFE around every file. Two, a use strict at the top of your IFE. And three, a lint tool or static code analysis tool to look for common mistakes. All right, now that we've covered that, let's go ahead and get JS installed. As a reminder, when we left off at the end of the last chapter, we had finished getting our one button reproducible build set up. So now we can run, anybody can download the code, have the right version of Node installed, run Jake, and see the same results on their machine that we see on ours. We're going to add linting to that process so that our build will also check to make sure that no errors have been made in the files. To start out with, we're going to install JS and that is just like everything else. We install JS ignore scripts because we don't want it to build anything, save it to our package.json, and wait. And there we go. Now we'll check this in. So we've installed JS and then we'll do an npm rebuild to make sure there was no binaries, but there weren't as usual. All right, now that we have JS installed, we can run it just by running node modules /bin/JS. If you're on Windows, you can do the same thing by using \. Now, that doesn't do anything, but if we say help, you'll get a list of options, a list of command line options. And specifically, what we need to do in order to make this go is just pass in the file name, I think. Let's go ahead and try it, jakefile.js. No complaints. I think that means it worked. Let's try breaking something. I think JS will complain if we leave out a semicolon. Let's try that. Yeah, there we go. It complains line 12, column 31, missing semicolon. So there we go. JS is working. Now, of course, we don't want to type this in manually every time. If you watched the last chapter, you know that I love automation. I want to be able to type Jake, one button, press enter, see build OK, know everything's perfect. And of course, right now, if we take out this semicolon or make some more egregious error, make a worse mistake, we're still getting build OK. So what I want to do is have our lint run from our build. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new task called lint that's going to be a dependency of our default build. I'll come down here and I'll put a description on it, create the task called lint, and this is going to have a console.log linting JavaScript. And if I say Jake now, we should see, yeah, there it goes, checking node version, linting JavaScript. Now what we need to do is get Jake to actually run JS for us. And Jake, like any build tool, has a way of conveniently running command line tools. If you go to the Jake documentation and scroll down, you'll find this jake.exec option. Now, it's been a little while since I've used this. Let's go ahead and give it a try. I think what we can do is just say jake.exec, then print standard out true, and, or rather, I think what we want to do is say interactive. Just give us all the output. And then it should break if there's a failure. Well, let's try it. Let's see what happens. So we should just be able to say jake.exec node. Now we need to say node here because just running what's in the .bin directory, this actually is going to be different in Windows and on the Mac. So what we need to do is go down into JS and look for its actual JS JavaScript file. So we'll say node modules, JS bin JS and we'll pass in the jakefile.js. In terms of options, we want to pass in that interactive :true. And then we'll tell it to run the complete function when it's done. That will say, because Node is asynchronous, and we'll get into what that means in more depth later, what's going to happen is while it's trying to run this program, it's going to keep executing. So we need to tell Jake that this, not to end the task until this complete function is called. It's a bit tricky, and we'll get into the details of asynchronicity more in the future. For now, just know that you need to say async true as the final option to your lint task and pass in this complete option here for jake.exec. Now, this may need to be an array, but I think this will work. Let's go ahead and give it a try. Well, it seems to have worked. Let's break something. We'll take out a semicolon here. Hey, there we go. Everything is working perfectly. So when it works, we get build OK, and when it fails, we get our output and Jake aborts. That is exactly right. Let's go ahead and check that in. So we've added JS hint to our Jake file. I'm going to go over to our Windows box and make sure it works because we're doing this directly running of JS hint thing. I'm not entirely sure we got that right for running on Windows. I think we did, but let's give it a try. There we go. It's working. We're missing our semicolon here. If I put that in and run Jake, everything works. Great. Go ahead and reset that back to the way it was. Perfect. So there we have it. We have automated JS hint, but I don't really like this approach. Now, when you're doing your builds, using this jake.exec is a great fallback. Most of the tools you're going to use are going to have a command line version, and you can just pass your parameters through here. But for JS hint, it takes a bunch of options, and we'll get into those in the next episode. And I want a way of providing them that's going to be right here in our config script. This command line tool is going to try to load the options out of a separate file, but I want them all right here together with our build. And also running the .exec like this, it's a little bit slow, and the more your build grows, the more important it is that it runs nice and fast. So as a result, I've built a tool called Simple Build JS Hint. It's basically a way of running JS Hint without running the command line tool. You'll see something similar for other build tools as well. Grunt and Gulp both have JS Hint plugins, for example. Simple Build JS Hint is not a Jake plugin. It's just a generic JS Hint runner that you can use with any build tool. Let's go ahead and set that up now. To install it, again, npm install. It's simple build -JS hint. We'll ignore scripts and save dev. Check that in. Do a rebuild to look for binaries, but as usual, there aren't any. Now to actually use this, let's take a look at the documentation. Simple build is a module. You'll require it and then call one of these functions. In my case, I'm going to call check files. That checks all of the files that we care about. So to do that, as you saw in the last episode, we're going to require the library. I'm going to call it JS hint, require simple build JS hint. And then down here, rather than calling jake.exec, what we're going to do is call jshint.checkfiles. That takes a list of options, which is an object, that is a set of name-value pairs. The first option is files. Because this is JavaScript, we don't have to put it in quotes like we did with JSON. And the file we want to check is jakefile.js. Options, there's also the ability to provide options, which we'll leave blank for now, and globals, which we'll also leave blank. And then to finish, we put the command to run when it succeeds, which is complete, and the function to run when it fails, which is fail. Complete and fail are built into to Jake. Again, complete is what you run when a task completes successfully and it's in asynchronous mode. Otherwise, it just finishes on its own. And fail is the command to run when you want a task to fail. So if I've done that right, we should still see an error coming out of our build when we run Jake. And there we go. You can see it says linting JavaScript, puts a dot out for the file that we've linted and tells us that which file failed. Jakefile.js failed, and here's the line number, the actual line itself, and the error message. So there we go. To make this read a little bit cleaner, because you'll notice that the JS hint runner will actually put out a dot for each file it runs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to not put out a dot. And I want it to show up on the same line. So instead of saying console.log, which automatically puts a line feed at the end, I'm going to use process.standardout.write. This says, using our global process and looking at the standard out, that is the stuff that comes out on the console, we want to write this string. But because we didn't use write line, but just write, it's not going to put a carriage return at the end. It's not going to put a line feed. So now when we run it, you'll see that our dot shows up next to linting JavaScript, which leads to very nice output when we have a success. Nice and clean. And that will, of course, write one dot for every file it processes. So there we go. We have now set up Simple Build to run JS Hint. Whether or not you use Simple Build yourself is up to you. It's just a little library I put together. It hasn't seen a lot of work because it's very basic and, well, simple. If you're using a tool other than Jake, you will probably have a plugin that you can use. If you are using Jake, you can either use the exec approach that I showed you before, or you can try this tool here. All right, that is it for this time. We can see our build starting to expand nicely. Next time, what we're going to look at is all the options that we have with linting and which ones we want to use. In the meantime, your exercises for this episode are to set up safe coding practices for your JavaScript environment. Set up a template that has that iffy around every file, that's that function parenthesis at the top and bottom, and use strict at the top. Using that template will make sure that you don't forget to include that in future files. And then set up a lint tool. If you're using Jake, try jake.exec or the Simple Build tool I showed you in this episode. If you tried Grunt or Gulp in a previous episode, see if you can get lint installed with one of those tools. As a challenge, take a look at an alternate linting tool like ESLint and see if you can automate that into your build as well. Remember, our goal here is to create a one-button safe build so that you press Jake or build or whatever it is, and with that one command, you can confirm that all your code is good. That's it for this time. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.